Hello. Hi. Welcome. How you doing? Good to see you all. Michael DePaul. Hello. T-Saw, Michigan Lifestyle, and Creighton. Good to see you folks. Um, doing pretty good today. Uh, and trying to get back into it. I don't have any tabs up for today. I am just going to discuss the subject. And I put out invitations on X, on Twitter. Um, but I don't have their emails, so they have to show up in chat. And if they do, then I'll bring them on panel. Otherwise, hey Janice. Otherwise, we're just going to get on with this, and well, yeah, kind of winging it because I'm trying to look into this and get more information on it. And hey, Squirrely. So the other thing is, again, I don't know if any of these folks are going to show up. Now hang on a second. Right now, while I think of it, just a second. Okay, there we go. Uh, there's people like Chinook that should be blue. There we go. Okay. Susie D is here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, like I said, I'm just gonna I've got some notes, and we'll go from there. Uh, I'm going to be getting a blue check mark on X. Tell October, and next month it'll be the budget. Right now it's not. What's the one? Uh, you know, we go do the time for it was 25. We were limited to how much you on. There was a few other things you could use, and so that's the same thing. In order to go first, I want to get back on the road. Now you can use your Rumble, and would like to be able to be on X, YouTube, and Rumble at the same time, like a lot of people that get a bigger audience. Anyways, happy. Uh, yeah. Okay. So we've got the same. Yeah. It's and we're in the country, folks, and we've had problems today with the reception. Um, the other thing I'd like to afford is Starlink. There's a new one, an ad. It looks tanky to me. It looks like a joke. It's just a box with four antennas, 4 or 5 antennas, free internet anywhere, and free Wi-Fi, and blah blah blah. Look, but I like to afford like. So okay, yeah, what I'm gonna do, like I said, I have some notes, and I'm pretty sure most Yeah, see, isn't it great? So anyways, sorry about that, folks. But yeah, so carry on. I think a lot of people know why we're here. I'm going to give just a quick one on the history end of it, and then we'll get into it. And I'm going to address in order those three things: 51st state, Alberta independence, and protectorate. So, um, we got this thing that happened in Canada a couple hundred years ago. It was a battle between the English and the French at the Plains of Abraham here on Canadian soil. It was in Quebec, and the English defeated the French. So the war is over. Canada is an English country, but they didn't force the French to speak English only. They didn't kick them out of the country. They just kissed and made up, basically. And it's never gotten better. So it's unfair in Canada how the whole thing is set up, the whole corporation, the way it flipped over from the Hudson's Bay Company and from British rule into this thing we have now, which is not, it's Confederation, the lie that's been sold. But it's always favored Quebec and Ontario and the Maritimes, but the East versus the West, and the West has always been the ones getting smacked around. Well, our resources and the money from our resources goes to the East, and that's just the way it is. And it's just been getting worse. In the mid 1950s, the Prime Minister Louis Saint Laurent, he was a Liberal Prime Minister, he brought in equalization payments, which means the provinces that were making more money were going to give some of that money to Ottawa, and then Ottawa would disperse it throughout the rest of the country to the provinces that weren't doing so well. That's kind of how it happened, but in reality, Quebec, one of the richest provinces, gets everybody else's money, and it kept getting worse. And then Black Friday, 1959, is the day that the Avro Arrow got canceled and destroyed. And that was the beginning. That was under John Diefenbaker, a conservative with a majority. And that was the beginning. The ripple effect of that started taking down, even though industry grew and manufacturing and mining and oil and all those things were growing and our economy was doing well. At the same time, pieces were being taken, regulations put in place, stuff was happening so that it would eventually just go to hell, and it didn't take that long. And in the late 1960s and 68, Pierre Elliott Trudeau got elected as the Liberal Prime Minister, and just like Mark Carney, who is he? He's a nobody, never done anything before. Boom, he's your leader. Here he is, take him and run. Okay, but the media sold it as here's this rock star. Okay, what happened then? Hey Tom, hey Awakened, is what happened then is they started moving people from Ontario and Quebec to the western provinces, especially to the capital cities, Winnipeg, Regina, most of them to Edmonton, and a bunch of them to Victoria. So the four western provinces, they started loading the cities up with people from the east, giving a lot of government jobs, letting them start business, helping them start businesses, getting things going. Okay, getting that vote out here, getting that voice out here. And they started building the new Democratic Party provincially, and it just kept getting worse. And then in 82, the Constitution was brought back from England, and the Queen even came over and signed a big fancy thing. It was all bullshit. It was all a lie. And people are finding out now. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is a corporate document, which we're sold as our Constitution, Quebec didn't sign it. But Quebec gets the lion's share of the transfer payments. They get the most seats in Parliament. Well, okay, Ontario does, but Quebec gets way more than enough. They get the most seats in the uh, Senate, and they pretty much get the most seats in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court and the Senate in Canada are appointed; they're not voted in. So it's just been a steamroll. And then since 2015, in March of 2015, the new Democratic Party won the election in Alberta, became the provincial government, and immediately started shutting things down. After the first thing Rachel Notley did, she hired 8,000 new provincial employees right off the bat. Boom. What they do, I don't know. But there was a big announcement. Oh, jobs, jobs, jobs. Yeah. Yeah. So then in October of that year, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government got a majority in Ottawa, and through conniving and deals with the New Democratic Party nationally through 3 elections, they have kept their majority, basically, and just steamrolled us with all this, just shutting down, especially the oil industry, but also agriculture and other manufacturing, just killing every industry they could in the name of climate change, bringing in all this rainbow stuff and all this DEI and just more, just no forethought at all. And here we are. And now we've got this planted prime minister. And apparently there's going to be an election announcement tomorrow. I will believe it when it actually happens, because there's just a lot of becauses.
And it's probably won't be a real election.
It won't be a real election anyways. My here's 2 ways the election will go. Way number 1 that I believe will happen is the Liberals will get a majority and they'll just keep steamrolling. Okay? Way number 2 is they give Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives a minority government, and they let them fumble along for a while just to appease the West. Oh, the Conservatives are in power, and they'll let them get away with a couple things and put some things through. But they're going to vote down just about everything they try to do. That's if the Conservatives get a majority government, that means they really do want the West to quit whining and crying and stay and appease us for a while. While again, behind the backs of everybody and everything, they just keep crashing it. Okay, so hang on. Yeah, PM should just never be put in place. Yeah, I know. Okay, so all right, well, let's get on with it. Okay, so 51st state, pros and cons. Now, let's say, and in my mind, this is the least likely of happening as far as Alberta goes. As far as Canada goes, here's the thing. Trump keeps saying 51st state. Everybody thinks it's one big Canada is one state, and they keep saying, they said it to him yesterday in an interview in the Oval Office. A reporter asked about the electoral college and the fact that it would be pretty blue up here. If there's annexation, if all that goes through, if something happens that actually was to happen, they would split things up into at least 4 regions or 4 states. I think they would probably split it up into 4 states. I think Ontario would be one, Quebec would be one, the Maritimes would be one, and the rest of Western Canada and the territories would be one. They might split some of the territories over the other ones, but that's what I would see happening. And again, it goes by population, basically, and that would help them control an impact on the electoral college. It would help. It would only, they'd only have to add 8 seats to the Senate, and if they did it as territories and not states, they wouldn't have to do any of that. The other thing they would have to do is if they annexed Canada and made it part of the United States and its fortress North America, you would, from what I understand about the American Constitution, and just the way things work and representation, those kinds of things. You know, your House of Representatives has to get bigger, your Senate has to get bigger, but so does the Supreme Court. There would have to be 11 members of the Supreme Court now. So that's, again, to do that, to get Canada into the fifth as a 51st state and fortress North America, pretty much rewriting big sections of the American Constitution. So this is a challenge. Now, excuse me, if Alberta was to leave the Corporation of Canada and be accepted as a state of the United States, which if this happened this quick, and the United States accepted us before they did Puerto Rico, that kind of thing, whether we're the 51st or the 52nd, they would only have to increase the House of Representatives by probably three seats. They would only have to add 2 seats to the Senate. So either way, 51st state, so we automatically get the American dollar. We automatically get the American military. We automatically get the American Constitution. There's a bunch of other things that would have to change, little nuanced stuff. Signs on the highway would have to go back to the way they used to be in the 70s so that it's be kilometers and miles an hour. There's just, a bunch of legal changes. Like our gun laws are gone. Thank the Lord. And we'd have the Second Amendment. The First Amendment would be actually enacted and we wouldn't have to put up with what we do now. We'd actually get some say. And it would mean something. And so a lot of the other amendments would come into play and articles of the Constitution of the United States. And the states is bigger and richer. In 2015, Alberta was the 13th richest territory in the world. Just the way it was, the way it is. Now, I don't know where we stand. I think we're still in the top 20. I think we're 17th. But the challenge with Alberta becoming the 51st state. So again, yeah, there's these things you wouldn't have to change the Constitution. If you brought in all of Canada, you'd have to change the Constitution. If you brought in just Alberta, you wouldn't have to in the States. But a lot of things would change here. And a lot of people would have to change the way they think. Police forces would have to change. Logistically, it's still a big deal for Alberta or any other Canadian province or any other territory in the world to join the United States. Because our governmental system immediately changes from a Westminster system to a republic system. And that's not that big of a deal, but the way people think about how things work would change. And so then the other thing is the whole system of judiciary and our laws and the way our courts work would change immediately. And boy, oh boy, there's a massive change. It's not as similar as people think it is from the Canada to the States. It's not. The way our courts work is not. There is a lot of similarities, but boy, there's a lot of differences, and that would change. And again, just a lot of our laws and regulations that we have now. The other thing is that so right now we have provincial employees and we have different jobs at different levels and there's different ministries and blah blah blah. Again, the way they operate and their way of thinking to get absorbed into the American system, you would have no choice, which is actually a good thing. You'd be firing a shit ton of people just like Trump is doing now, because Doge would come in immediately. Doge would hit Alberta like a semi trailer with a D8 cat on the back, rolling through a stop sign, just going. I mean, that's what it would be like. Well, no, they wouldn't get rid of metric completely. Like I said, I think what would happen is immediately all the road signs, speed limit signs, things like this, would have miles per hour and kilometers an hour. It'd be very clearly marked. When they switched over from miles an hour to kilometers an hour in the 70s, the signs were like that well into the 1980s. They still had miles per hour and kilometers an hour well into the 1980s. So that would come back immediately. And like I said, our system of government, our system of judges and all that would all change. I was just going to get to the banks. Okay, so yes, they'd immediately have to buy all Canadian dollars in all of the banks and reissue them back to the people as American dollars. And there would have to be a big discussion on going off the value of the Canadian dollar versus the American dollar, or going one for one. Okay. And then all of those Canadian banks would not be able to operate in Alberta anymore in the United States. Now there are like TD, Toronto Dominion, there is a TD bank in the States, things like this, but for the most part, no, they're gone. We have our Alberta Treasury branch, and we have credit unions and things like that. And there would have to be discussions on how that all happens. But we would have to switch over from the Canadian banking system to the American banking system, and we'd have to switch to the American dollar. Now, Trump keeps talking about taxes going down and all this. Yes, there'd be no GST. In Alberta, unlike everywhere else in Canada has a provincial sales tax that gets tacked on your bill, no matter what you buy, just like the GST, the gotcha sucker tax, the federal tax, the goods and services tax. I call it the gotcha sucker tax. But there's a PST, a provincial sales tax. Some of them call it something different, but it's still the same thing. Alberta doesn't have that. Now, I know that in the States and places, there are sales taxes just like that, too. But we wouldn't have that. Pretty sure they wouldn't do it here. So, actually, think of it. They might have to bring it in. Here's why. Again, I'm going to get into something. So, with the 51st state, you are automatically becoming part of the United States, right? And now we have to form a National Guard. The Canadian military would leave. The RCMP would leave. There's all kinds of things going on with that, because the way it works with the Canadian military is all of the equipment and everything belongs to everybody in Canada. So it would have to leave. All the tanks, all the planes, all the soldiers would have to leave. Unless they were to release and say, I want to live in Alberta, kind of thing, right? Now, it's not the same with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The way the RCMP works is they are a corporation that charges a fee to the province to be the police force. But all the cars, all their uniforms, all the guns, all the equipment, all of that, the buildings, everything like that is owned by Alberta. So the RCMP officers themselves would toodaloo again, unless they just told the RCMP, no, I'm releasing and I'm going to live in Alberta. Okay. And it's not automatic that they would be policemen in the new Alberta. In fact, the conventions I've been to, they wouldn't be, but that's just another thing. Under the 51st state, a deal might be made and they might become the state police. Don't know. We have the Alberta Sheriff's Department, which is now more of a police department. We used to have the Alberta Highway Patrol decades ago. It was a provincial police force, but they got rid of that in the 80s. But the police forces and the banking and all those, that would have to be dealt with. Now, provincial parks is easy because they belong to the province, but national parks, here's where it gets sketchy. Because Banff National Park, Wood Buffalo National Park, Jasper National Park, there's a couple others. These are national parks. You know who owns those? King Charles and the United Nations. True story. So what would happen? Would all that land, would that get fenced off and become British territory? Or would we just tell Chuck, yeah, thanks for coming out? I mean, we'd have to figure that out. If Alberta becomes its own independent land, if the people vote, we can just tell him to take off. But if it's a 51st state, that presents another issue. So I think leading the 51st state, we have to go to Alberta independence. I think we have to become an independent Alberta first before anything. And that means before becoming a 51st state or 52nd. If the United States does the right and proper thing, in my opinion, which is Puerto Rico should be a state before anybody else. They've been waiting longer than anybody else. So anyways, there's that. But let's say it happens. But first, I think, and again, this is where logistics get real sketchy. This is where we've really got a problem, is Alberta, we have a referendum, we have a vote, and the answer is yes. And by the way, folks, it's about 70% of Albertans right now. I know you're seeing the news stories that says, oh, 40%. There was an independent poll some cute little girl did. Okay, no. The polls that are out, the actual polls that were done a few months ago and even up to like a week ago, it's in the 70s. It's in the 70%. And if Mark Carney and the Liberals call an election and they win, boom, done. If they don't call an election, then they keep their crap up. There'll be a referendum this summer. Boom, done. Now, under international law, we take over. That's it. The Alberta people take over. It's done. Okay? Any corporations operating here like Shell or Mobil One or Esso or Petro-Canada, which is out of Quebec, they have a choice. They can ask NICE to keep working here, but the whole relationship changes. All of the governments from top to bottom, from the tiniest little hamlet and village all the way up to the provincial government, are gone. They don't exist anymore. Representatives would stay in place for a period of time until a new vote can be put forth, and a constitution and a declaration and all these things. So everything gets put on hold, everything gets stopped. And there would be demands right off the bat. And all laws from Alberta and from Canada don't exist anymore. We go back strict. This is under international rule, okay? This is laws that are in the international courts in the UN. Boom. Okay? We go back to common law. So this again logistically creates a problem because now the big five banks, the big Canadian banks, can just leave and tell everybody else, no, sorry. They can put in petitions that, well, I've got a mortgage. Scotiabank can say, well, 2,000 people in Alberta have mortgages for land and houses. 10,000 people have car loans. I'm using crazy, and I'm just using numbers off the top of my head, but this kind of thing, okay? And all of a sudden, well, do we use the Canadian dollar? Because now we're a foreign country. So do we beg and plead and say, well, no, because they've got us over the barrel. So we take the hit. And there is an Alberta dollar. It's not defunct, but it's dormant. It was in operation and in use for business and transactions up until the 1930s, but it's there. Now, we don't have printing presses that I know of. Pretty sure the Canadian Mint isn't going to print for us. So again, the most logical choice would be to ask the Americans for help. Now, could we go back and ask Great Britain for help? Yes. But then Chuck would want to keep his parks. See where I'm going? So we've got that. That's a problem. So this is where the third one comes in, Protectorate. Now, Scotland is a protectorate of Great Britain, of the United Kingdom. It's its own country. It has its own laws, has its own rules and borders. It governs itself municipally and nationally and provincially. They use the British pound as their currency, and they pay a fee to be part of the British military. And their citizens can join the British military and serve, blah, blah, blah. So, to be a protectorate, we would be Alberta, we would be independent. We would be able to switch over to the American dollar. So we would have a currency. We would be able to develop our own currency because that's how we could write the agreement. And my suggestion is that's how we would do it, is that we would get to the Americans, we'd say, look, we're going to international trade and all these kinds of things. Yes, we're going to use the American dollar. We're going to issue American dollars right away. But we are going to develop our own internal currency. And there's advantages to that. And I think we should do that because it's there. We just have to get it back and build it back and use it. Okay. Now, the military, here's my proposal. I put this on X today, and I think it's got like 40 likes so far. Because I don't have a very big account. I haven't been back on X long. I don't do much there. I've only just started getting active in the last week. Not even, I guess, about a week. So, here's my proposal. We make an agreement with the United States. and we pay a fee for the United States military to bring soldiers and equipment here and protect us from international problems. That's their only job. That's what they're doing. They would just make sure nobody invades. They would help us take down gangs and international cartels. All that bullshit that Trudeau is not doing right now. Okay, but we'd pay a fee. We're not begging for free. Oh, please come protect us. No, 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 no. We have an economy. We have strength. We have resources, and they're ours. And we are going to build that all up. But we need to make sure that China doesn't come running in, right? That kind of thing. So we would pay a fee to the United States, and American soldiers would come up here. We would form our own military starting immediately. We would start building our own military immediately. So for the first 5 years of our existence, we are a military protectorate of the United States directly. During that time, we build our own military within 3 years, and then our military works with the American military. We are a friendly partner. And after the 5 years, the Americans would keep a couple bases here, just like they do in all these other places where they do things. But that would be just for their interests, okay? And for them to be able to have an air base, way up in northern Alberta by high level or something like that, and be able to get their planes, you know, out over other skies to protect their interests, kind of thing, just like the deals they have now. Because if Canada's still Canada, whether Alberta's in it or not, there's still NORAD, etc., blah blah blah. Okay, we become a protectorate. NORAD still covers us, but we build our own military. Now, here's the thing: if Alberta leaves, Saskatchewan won't be far behind. Yukon won't be far behind. Pretty sure the Northwest Territory is going to jump right in. And I think at least the top half of British Columbia, which there's a movement on right now for British Columbia, wants the people in most of British Columbia want to get the hell away from the lower mainland because they're sick and tired of the city making all the decisions for the province and all this woke bullshit and stupid rules and taking away agriculture and stopping, big trucks on the. It's just so stupid. They're so bad. It's not even funny. And most of the people in British Columbia that live outside of the lower mainland are like, see ya. So I think we'd get them pretty quick. And I think Canada would still want to be really friendly with us. I don't think they'd want to get snarky with us. And I think that it would either all be called Alberta, and then they want to call it Pacifica when they split off. So that would be the state of Pacifica, the state of the Yukon, the state of Northwest Territories, and the state of Saskatchewan, something like that, right? Okay. We might all become Northwest America or Western Canada, or you know, three men and a baby. I don't know, whatever name they come up with, and flag and all that, right? But it would start with Alberta. And so I see logistically a lot of issues with Alberta separation, Alberta breaking off. And by the way, all these little rules, all this bullshit people are going to come out with, all this stuff you hear from Ottawa, and all this stuff that's in the charter, and all this stuff that's in the British North America, all, and just Confederation, on and on and on and on and on and on. And guess what? Uh, all those papers they want to bring here are toilet paper. It's a corporation, and all we have to do is declare that we are no longer in the corporation. All of their corporations are now defunct. All of their corporations are now the property of Alberta, which is the beautiful part of the bullshit they've been doing to us. Is me with my social insurance number and anyone else that lives in Alberta, we become technically, for a minute, to get us away from them, property of Alberta. But we are the people of Alberta, so we own it. So that corporation status and all that junk goes away. And everything that Shell owns, everything that Esso owns, everything that Ford, Chevy, and Dodge own, you get where I'm going? The parks, all of that, it's ours. And we just declare it. And that's why we get a hold of the President of the United States and say, hey, here's the deal. And paying for the military thing, that's easy to figure out because there are already fees for UN service and NATO service. There's already costed in. They already know how much all these things is going to cost. So again, the President of the United States and the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense would be the ones that would deal with all this. And they've got their people and they've got all that figured out. They'd come up with a number and Alberta would go back to work and our oil field would be back and our agriculture would be back. Our manufacturing and mining would be back. Manufacturing would take off in anew because there'd be a lot of things we need to build. Okay. There'd be trade with the United States. Boom, 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 boom. I think at first we'd be cut right off from Canada, especially if the Liberals are in power. Okay. And yeah, so Awaken says we'd be much stronger as one continent, one large force for the good stand against the likes of China, Russia, etc. Yes, there's too many idiots from Manitoba to the Maritimes that would rebel and burn Teslas and be stupid. I mean, it's just a fact. Fact. I'm sorry. There's a lot of good people. There are a lot of conservatives. There'll be motorhomes and U-Hauls just heading west. I guarantee you. But there's a lot of people there that are just too silly, and they're falling for all this crap that's going now. Yeah, united we stand, divided we fall. We must remain Canadians. We don't need to send millions per year to the ceremonial monarchy across the pond. To hell with the useless Governor General. Well, again, the only way, Chinook, the only way to get out of that system is to leave. The only way to get rid of those things is to get the hell out and tell them to leave, and we're done. We have to do it. I've been going over this in my head for years. And again, every time anything happens, look what just happened today. Yesterday. Okay, Mark Carney comes to Edmonton and makes a bunch of announcements. Sits down with Danielle Smith, says, "Oh yeah, everything's going to be great," and then flies back to Ottawa, has a meeting with all the other premiers, and then his ministers come out and say, "Oh no, we're not doing that." I wasn't in the panel. I tried to get on the panel. We had some technical difficulties. There's this thing on X called Space, and you can have discussions with people. You can bring up a panel and talk. There was one last night and another one today. And yeah, I didn't have the blue check mark. Next month I will. But anyways, the cats are arguing with me too. Actually, there's a lot of commotion outside. The ranch is moving all the bulls from over here, and taking them up to the other pastures, and they have other fields. They're getting ready to switch things over for spring. Yes, your buddies are leaving. Yes. Shucks, wants to go talk to his friends with the Longhorns. So there's a lot of commotion going on. Anyways, no, look, it was put really well. We are in an abusive relationship, and Ottawa abuses us and then kisses and makes up for a minute so that we think everything's fine until they get what they want for that minute, and then they abuse us again. So we need to divorce them. We need to just say, okay, enough's enough, file for divorce and leave and get it over with. And now there was also discussion and people making points, and you should have heard the people from Ontario and Quebec. Oh my God. Oh no, we can't do this. Oh yeah, they're just freaking right out. You could tell who the government agents were too. There's one guy in there. I picked him out in a hurry. And just the way they talk. Oh God. And again, dismissive. They're just like their argument to everything was no, that's not how it works. Basically. Like they weren't listening to the Alberta argument at all. Didn't want to listen to it. They would come and say, "Oh, we believe the same, and they've done this to us, and we see the whole country suffering." And talk to Newfoundland fishermen, and talk to Ontario nickel workers, and blah 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 blah. And then in the next sentence, well, they'd be just berating us for even coming up with the concept. So, but this what has to happen. Um, did I hear that Trump has said he's up for being an associate member if the Commonwealth, what? An associate member of the Commonwealth? Did you mean in instead of if? I hadn't heard that. Hey Janice, Nanaimo is one of my fondest memories. A lot of beautiful places. There is. I said this to a guy the other day. I've said it many times in my life. I've been to some of the ugliest shitholes in the world, war zones. Most of them used to be beautiful countries, and when you get away from the war, a lot of times there's still beauty to be seen everywhere. Uh, some of the most corrupt cities in the world are some of the most beautiful cities in the world. Uh, we need to sort out shit before China seizes Taiwan. We can't. We're not going to. If Alberta becomes its own thing, we are not going to be joining NATO. We get into a protectorate with the states. Their military protects us. If our people want to join, that's fine. But again, we should sign an agreement. If our people want to join the American military, we stay here in Alberta. You don't get to take us to wherever you have to. Okay. But no. The Taiwan thing, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's the way it is. And it goes for all this foreign spending. All that bullshit's gone. Just like Doge is happening in the States, Alberta would just cut it. Well, we don't do a lot of it now, thank God. It's all Ottawa doing it, but we send them billions of dollars, $40 billion a year, and then they screw us over. We don't get any of it back. Quebec gets 11 billion out of that. And Quebec is not a poor province. But no, the Taiwan thing, the Ukraine thing, the Gaza thing. Oh well, sorry. And on Facebook, there are people in Ontario that want to be the 51st. I know there's people all over that want to. You're going to probably find some in Quebec as well. They'll be quiet as hell, but you'll find them. But no, again, if all of Canada became the 51st state, in order to make that happen, the Americans would still have to appease a big portion of the population. There still have to be concessions and all of that. Okay. And it would be a shitstorm. It would continue to be a shitstorm for a very long time. That solution is too big of a scale, especially when America is trying to fix its own bed right now. It's trying to make its own bed, trying to fix things. Okay. Nope. Okay. You still got the Ukraine bullshit happening. Okay. Still got the Gaza shit happening. There's American soldiers all over the world, shit going on. Okay. No, it's not going to work. Alberta becomes our own land. Dirty sausage, you're late. But he's here. So Awakened, I'd like to see set up a petition on change.org open to all Canadian citizens to see exactly where the 51st state ship would go. Yeah, there are people working on what I'm talking about right now. The 51st state thing, there's tons of them working on it. All kinds of, there's 3 delegations from Alberta. They're not talking to each other, but they're sure talking to the Americans. They're sure going down to Washington and meeting with people. Yeah. Okay. That 51st state thing has got them all wound up because they all have dollar signs in their eyes. And they all want to carry 6-shooters on their hip. And to everybody here, it's a big FU to Trudeau, especially, and the East. Yeah, Sean, one world order, right? Yeah, no, we're trying to get away from that. The new world order, the one world order, we're trying to get away from it. Yeah, I don't want any more of our tax dollars going overseas. Well, that's the thing. We become Alberta. We're not shelling money out of Alberta anymore to the rest of Canada. Okay, we use all that money for ourselves. We build Alberta first. Okay, like there's a lot of things to do to build Alberta first. Again, all these provincial employees, they're gone. They'll live wherever they want to live, I guess, but they don't have jobs anymore. Now, I guess you're going to have to keep a bunch of people to do certain things for a while. You still need your garbage collectors. You still need the guys that run the graders and the dump trucks, and there's still jobs that have to be fulfilled. But a lot of these administrative and bullshit government jobs are just like Doge right now, closed, over, done. Okay, there's no more Canada Revenue Agency. Again, the constitutional conventions I've been to, everything's a flat tax. You don't need a bunch of people working at the tax department because it's cut and dry. There's a flat tax, done. Okay. Yeah, DJT wants out of NATO. I knew that. Cage, what about taxes? Do you pay more than the Americans? Yes. Okay. Just on income tax on your check, it's around 43%. Then there's hidden taxes in products all over the place. Now that's where there are provincial sales taxes. They're hidden taxes on a bunch of different products. And then the federal taxes. So for instance, for us to buy, okay, so a 2-liter milk, so half a gallon, a 1 gallon, a 4-liter milk here is $8. Okay. Now, when you go to the till, you don't have to pay tax on that, but there's a bunch of hidden taxes in it already. But just the cost of things. Okay. Now, the trucking company that moved that from the farm where you got the milk to the distribution center where they pasteurized it and sent it out, he had to pay GST for his fuel and his licensing, and GST, gotcha sucker tax. It's the goods and services tax. So here's an example. I know you have similar taxes in the States, but I'm just going to let you know how things are. So I buy toothpicks. Okay, and yeah, let's say it's $2.50. Is there a price tag on this? I don't know. Let's just say it's two. It'd be $2.50 at the dollar store. Ironic in Canada, in Alberta. Okay, so now the guy that made the toothpicks had to pay GST on all the equipment he bought to make those toothpicks. Then he had to pay GST when he bought the container with the lid on that container. So then he gets his price that he has to charge. And when it goes to his next customer, which is usually a distributor, the distributor has to pay him GST. So whoever made this charges GST. You don't keep that. That goes to the government. When you charge GST, you pay it at the end of the month to the government. They don't like to wait. Sometimes you can do the 3-month thing. It's usually, anyways, trust me, if you want to not get in shit, you do it once a month. Okay, when you run a small business. Now, the distributor. Okay, now that from here, then he takes it to the corner store, the grocery store, wherever, and they pay him the GST. Okay, so he had to charge them to make up for the GST he paid the guy that made them. So now, whoever buys this in the store, you have paid the GST for everything originally because it got charged before it left to make up for losing that money. Then, when it went to the distributor, you have paid that GST. When it went to the store, you have paid that GST. And then when you get to the till, you pay the GST on top of all of that. That's Canada. So by the time you've paid for this, the guy that made it, barely lucky if he made a buck. Okay, really lucky if he made $1. Okay, but you've paid $5 for it, and over a third of that was GST at all the different levels going to the government. So we become Alberta, we get rid of that. 51st state, hopefully we get rid of that. But if we become Alberta, we do. Now, what is proposed is called an end user sales tax. So how that works is, if let's say it's my products, it's my, I don't even have one in my, but let's say this is one of my charcoal products. Okay, if I sell this at a farmer's market, I charge a flat tax of 5%, but they only pay that one time. Okay, if I send it to a distributor, I don't charge a tax. If the distributor sends that to a store, they don't charge a tax. So only the end user at the end, when it's retailed out, pays that 5% flat tax. Why do you do it that way? Because now the businesses can afford to do something, and there's no red tape, there's no bullshit. Okay, does Alberta make less money? Because right now, the federal government with the GST is making hand over fist, right? Yes, but how do they make more money? Because people have more money. More things can be bought, more things can be produced, more economy can happen. So it'll get better. Mad Chad, greetings from the Erie Coast. Hello. Okay, I'm just gonna hang on, just gonna back up here and catch chat a little bit more. So that was Susie D. Hang on. That was pay more than the Americans. Yes, so that was the explanation on that. DJT wants out of NATO. Yes. Cindy, hello. River Ave. If you all could actually shoot the guns you are allowed to have, that is pretty much American. Well, and again, yeah, it's only been since it was getting. They had some gun laws in place, and they're stupid. And by the way, they're only regulations. They're not laws because none of them went through Parliament. Not one gun law we have in Canada is a law. They're all been orders in council. Stupid, right? Anyway, how is our healthcare? It's a joke. We become Alberta, healthcare is back. Because again, you've got a really rich Alberta. And so they'd be able to pay for everything, hire doctors, start new schools. Okay, we still have all that stuff here. We teach doctors and nurses here. Okay, so we can make that happen. So Carly Simon wants to know, Rage, it's not clear to me how northern BC is factored in. Does it become part of Alberta? I think so, yes. I think right now there's a movement, and you can find it. I don't have the name of it and all that. Been going on for a couple of years. It's gaining traction all the time. It's getting way more talk now quietly because they're letting everybody else blab about all this other shit like we're doing right now. The clickbait is 51st state. Okay. But northern British Columbia could become its own, first become its own province or become its own thing. And it could just say, nope, we're out, we're gone, see you later. They might beat Alberta to it. Okay. But then if they joined Alberta, that would be awesome. And I think that's going to happen. I don't know how long it'll take, but I think it's going to happen. Same with the Yukon. The Yukon, they'll just take the easy path. Right now, they're getting freebies from because they're a territory, they're getting all kinds of freebies from Ottawa. And Ottawa is filling them up with liberals. Nobody wants to live there. The liberals keep leaving, moving back to warmer territories. Yeah, the Yukon is begging, and they would love to be a U.S. protectorate because now the Chinese soldiers would have to leave. Same with British Columbia. The Chinese soldiers would have to leave. There's some here in Alberta, but not as many as in the Yukon because of the gold and the other stuff in BC. But they'd all have to leave. If we became a protectorate and the U.S. military moved in, those boys they'd be gone. And Trump would be on the phone. Gee, pack your bags. But yeah, the northern BC thing, yes. Whether they can become their own province and separate from the lower mainland and apply to Ottawa to be their own province and start that process, or just say no, we're gonna be independent. But either way, I think northern BC would join Alberta just like Saskatchewan and the Yukon would, and it wouldn't take that long. Okay. Waken says, I think the future of healthcare is going to change drastically when the more than 6,000 U.S. patients are revealed and put into place, and that will revolutionize healthcare. Well, okay, in bold new ways. Yeah, look, again, if Alberta gets away from Canada and becomes our own thing, and we're going to take over our own healthcare, we have no choice, but technically we do right now anyways. The corporations are gone. The bullshit is gone. Those high prices for everything are gone. And that is something that we have to work out the details on, but healthcare would be good to go. What do you got there? A carrot cake with icing. Looks good. We made carrot cake. I get to say I helped. I sat at the table and I used the grater and I grated the carrots and then held onto the counter with a death grip and I stirred some stuff. And
Oops, that's yours.
Yeah, you just took mine. You just gave that to me. She's trying to take my food. Um, yeah, RFK Jr. is going to Maha. So if we become the 51st, we'll be included in Maha movement. Yeah, make healthcare great again. Yeah. Make American healthcare great again. Yes. Janice R. In the USA, the primary diagnostic tool in clinics and big pharma trial and error. New real health schools are coming. Well, again, yeah, and again, Alberta has its own programs and has for a very, very long time. And there's all kinds of small town hospitals that have been closed over the years or reduced in services, all that kind of stuff. We can bring all that back. You know, when I was growing up, you didn't have to go that far to go to the hospital. Like, our town had a full service hospital. There was surgeons, there was everything. Okay. We didn't have a dentist or an eye doctor, but they would come to town once a month, and then your next town over had them, kind of thing, right? Um, but a bunch of little towns, you didn't have to go far, 40, 50 miles, in many cases 30 miles, and that's when it was all in miles. Okay, and you were at the next town with a hospital, and again, they had a surgeon. Okay, they had an anesthesiologist, they had their own x-ray department, they had all of this stuff. It wouldn't be that hard to bring it all back and do that again. A lot of those now are, there's still emergency rooms, and but what they'll do is if it's really that serious, they put them in an ambulance and they take them to the next town that has the big hospital. And this started in the 80s and 90s with them reducing down to this, but it wouldn't be that hard to build it all back. And we've got medical schools in Alberta, and so to put all these other hospitals back into place and then use them for training centers. And yeah, okay. Susie, we lost 2 relatives doing Canadian social medicine. Yeah, 2 months to wait for tests, 2 more months to see a doc. One died, heart attack, other cancer at 25. Yes. Well, again, I mean, I'm going through what I'm going through right now, and I waited for a year to get into the specialist, and because of my accident, I got in to see the specialist a few weeks earlier. They sped it up. But with my old injury before this one, I was waiting for a fucking year. Okay. I've been waiting for hip replacement and knee replacement 8 years because COVID, I was on the list and then COVID fucked everything up. So, yeah, we can get rid of all that. We can change all that. Okay. Couldn't they just join Alaska? Yeah, they could. Yeah, BC could join Alaska if they wanted. But again, that's statehood. That's another thing. Here's the other thing about 51st state, okay, folks? Um, um, and I forgot to bring this up. It's in my other note page. In order for the United States to accept a territory from anywhere else and become part of the United States, that's got to go through Congress, and it's got to go through the governors. It's got to go through the states. And I don't know what the bar is. I know a lot of things. There has to be 35 states agree to it. And in the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court, it's got to be a really high vote. I think the Supreme Court has to be unanimous. They all vote on it, folks. So before the 51st state thing happens, uh, your executive branches are voting on it. Moscow Blue is here. Hello. How you doing? Janice R. Well, yeah, Mexican. I'm still alive because of Mexican medicine. My first fight with cancer the Cross Cancer Institute in Edmonton was working with the big cancer institute and the big hospital in Mexico City. And it was actually doctors from Mexico working in Canada with my doctor at the Cross Cancer. And they got me, instead of going through chemo and all those other things, I went through chelation therapy. And that was Mexican doctors. That was a program going on at the time in the early 90s. And it was a work together kind of program. Yeah. So well, yeah, you were talking about Windsor, and there's 2 hospitals. I know, and that it's again, it's the same here. Like the night that I got hurt, almost a month ago now, I was in 3 hospitals that night.
Didn't have enough beds.
The boss took me from the farm to Olds, and I was in emergency there and trauma, and they took care of me, did all that, and put me in a neck brace and did all those things. And then the next morning, because they didn't have a CAT scan or an MRI, they put me in an ambulance and took me to Red Deer, 110 clicks from Olds, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was there for a night, and then they took me to Innisfail, but then Innisfail didn't have a bed for me, so then they took me back to Olds. So yeah, our health system sucks. Our health. Here's the thing, like I said, we get all these tiny little hospitals going all over Alberta, get things suited up, and again, they all used to have X-rays back when that's what you had, right? Well, now put in CAT scans, put in MRIs, do all that. That's the kind of thing we can build. Well, I think that Fortress North America really would be the greatest thing if we could do it. It's not going to happen with the current systems. Something has to give, and I think Alberta leaving tips the balance, and that's what happens. And I really do. I really believe that it's going to happen. I really do. I'm watching what's going on here in Canada, of course. This whole Mark Carney thing, and there's all people talking about, oh, he's here to be the executor and we're in probate. And look, if that happens, it happens. Everything falls to shit. If that happens, if probate happens, Alberta becomes its own country. British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Yukon, Quebec, Prince Edward Island, all of them, they become their own countries. We go into probate, the corporations are dissolved, it goes back to the Statute of Westminster, which was supposed to happen in 1935 and didn't, which is another thing that they can't go after Queen Elizabeth because it happened before her, but she knew about it all those years. Chuck knows about it now. Our governments have all known about it. So people's heads are going to roll. The whole probate thing, that's just another hornet's nest. Under the corporation right now, everybody's jumping up and down, screaming and hollering that Carney's going to call an election on Sunday, which is tomorrow. I'll believe it when it happens. I will. Honest to God. Hang on. Hold it. Oh, wait. Oh, it's okay. It's just coffee. There will be scotch. No thanks, honey. I'll wait. It's early. It's early yet. No, it's gonna happen. But when will it happen? I I think that Parliament is going to resume on Monday, and Carney will be sitting in the gallery. Okay, and he might have to come down and sit in a chair beside the Governor General as the throne speech is read. Okay, because they'll have to do that. And then the bullshit continues. The Liberals are going to put through a bunch of shit, and the NDP is going to back them. And it's going to go one of two ways. Either they're just going to keep pounding it to us and get what they want and ha ha ha, or just like Carney has been doing over the last few days, stealing all the points of the Conservatives, putting a bunch of that stuff through so Western Canada goes, oh, okay, that's all right, thank you. Okay, is the game on yet? Is the hockey game on? Can you rewind that? I missed that. Can you rewind that, please? That's honestly, serious, lads. I'm not joking. Okay, they'll appease the West, or there will be an election. Here's the other one. There will be an election. Carney will get a mandate, and holy fuck, we're done. Alberta leaves. Or what I think will happen, they're going to run things for a few months. They're going to try and put a bunch of this shit through. Okay, and the Conservatives are going to fight them on a bunch of stuff, and then they'll call an election. Okay, and it'll be, oh, the Conservatives wouldn't let us do that, wouldn't let us do that, wouldn't let us do that, and they voted against this. And so I see that the Liberals end up with a majority, but it's a tiny one, but it doesn't care because they have it. Right? Or the Conservatives have a minority. It appeases the West. They can't get anything done. I mean, it's just a nightmare. It's ball bearings in a washing machine to know what the hell's going on. But I will, when there's actually an election called, then I'll believe there's going to be an election. Hey, Wall, how you doing? Supposedly Carnival Carney is under investigation. Oh yeah, of course they are. Yeah, by who? The RCMP that they own? Did you see the meeting with the commissioner of the RCMP and Carney? It was just like the meeting with Doug Ford. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Rainbows and purple bunnies. No, we're fucked. Alberta needs out. End of story. There we go. I went way over my time. Now we're in 17 minutes. It's carrot cake just sitting there. It's right there. I can see it from here. But yeah, so the 51st state thing could happen after we become our own independent country. Going down and talking about the Protectorate, and then something might swing, and they could have some votes down in the states and some constitutional conventions, and that could happen. That's a long process, though. I see that being a very long process. It would still have to pass the House of Representatives and the Senate to be a protectorate. You wouldn't have to change your constitution. You wouldn't have to add seats to your House of Representatives or your Senate or any of those things. So, and as far as charges against Trudeau and charges against Carney and charges against anybody else, I think they just got that figured out, and I think the only true justice is if a big civil war breaks out and there's no more rule of law, and there's nowhere to hide. Otherwise, they're going to get away with it. They're going to run away with their money, and we all just have to pick up the pieces and start over. So there we go. That's it. An hour and 20 minutes ish. Okay. Thanks everybody, and hopefully we can talk about something happier next time. All right. Cheers.